A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, the Levitical priests were many because they were prevented by death from remaining in office. But Jesus, because he remains forever, has a priesthood that does not pass away. Therefore, he is always able to save those who approach God through him, since he lives forever to make intercession for them. It was fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, undefiled, separated from sinners, higher than the heavens. He has no need, as did the high priests, to offer sacrifice day after day, first for his own sins and then for those of the people. He did that once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints men subject to weakness to be high priests, but the word of the oath, which was taken after the law, appoints a son, who has been made perfect forever. The word of the Lord.
Our second reading for this Sunday comes from the letter to the Hebrews. You know, the letter to the Hebrews is a very sophisticated portion of the New Testament. It has what we can call a rather refined understanding of Jesus Christ. And it is fascinating because it can be considered one of the earliest reflections on Jesus, sophisticated at that, which also attempts what we now call enculturation. Looking at the prevailing culture of the Hebrews, their familiarity with the temple, with worship, with sacrifice, and with institution of the priesthood, and using all of this creatively to reflect on the significance of Jesus. So Jesus is presented by the letter to the Hebrews as our high priest. And the contrast is presented. The human high priests, the high priests of the Old Covenant, what we now call the Old Testament, they were sinners like us, and they offered sacrifices in the temple, not only for the people, but for themselves. But then came a new high priest, the high priest of the new covenant, Jesus Christ. While he is truly human, he is God. He is the Son of God. And the Son of God became human, became a compassionate high priest, precisely because he is a human being, without sinning, but nevertheless assuming everything that humanity, the human condition offers. Now, because he is risen from the dead, because he now sits at the right hand of the Father and is in the eternal presence of the Father, our high priest, Jesus, does not need to offer sacrifice over and over again. He did it once and for all. Now, my dear brothers and sisters, here we find a very concrete manifestation of the commandment of love talked about by Moses in the first reading. Jesus, the high priest, is presented by the letter to the Hebrews as the embodiment of total love of God by total obedience to the Father. He did not withhold anything. Talking about loving God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your mind, you can verify this in Jesus, our high priest. He emptied himself of everything. Everything was offered to the Father. But here is another dimension. Jesus, the high priest, obeyed the Father totally in love and fulfilled the will of the Father. And what is the will of the Father? That everyone be saved. Wow! So, Jesus' love for the Father is manifested by His total love also of His neighbors, being one of them, saving them as a compassionate brother. So we find in Jesus the high priest, love of the Father coupled with love of neighbor. You offer everything to the Father, not for your own sake, but you offer everything to the Father for the sake of the people that you love. My dear brothers and sisters, the new covenant, exemplified by our high priest, brings the old covenant, the old law in Moses, to fruition and completion.